5 million Australians have taken up angling as a pastime and can be found fishing from rocks, boats, jetties or on the beach, all hoping for a good catch. Many anglers will go home well rewarded for their effort, while most will go home empty-handed, wondering why they missed out, especially when the angler next to them seemed to have all the luck and finished with a bag full of fish. Why? The answers lie with one of Australia's best-known fishing experts, Bruce Harris. Bruce has spent a lifetime passing on his knowledge of fishing to the general public through the media, fishing schools and books. This video is designed to instruct the novice as well as the experienced angler to become more skillful in the art of fishing. We begin with fishing from the shore and jetty to fishing from a boat. First of all, you must think like a fish. That's the most important thing a newcomer to fishing must learn. This revolves around three things: tides, food and weather. The best times to fish from a boat are an hour before and after the change of each tide. In estuaries, fish the same time as you would from a boat, and from the beach an hour before high tide. During a full moon, the weather for fishing is generally fine, but if a storm does start, it'll be a beauty. Another thing to remember is that fish bite best on a falling barometer. This is because most fish have a wind bag next to their stomachs which deflates as the glass falls, giving more room in the stomach for food. Tides play the biggest part in the food chain for fish, and an hour before and after the change of tide is the best time for fishing. Food is also the reason why shoreline fish like sand whiting, mullet, brim and mulloway bite best on the rising high tides. During the low tide each day, small shellfish and worms die in the sun's heat, and the fish follow the tide in to feed on them. However, as soon as the tide turns to run off, they'll head for deeper water again, to prevent being trapped in the shallows. So whenever you go away for a weekend's fishing from the shore, be sure you know when the high tide is in that particular area and fish it. Best of all, have a tide book with you wherever you go. Choosing a rod and reel can be a hard task for a budding fisherman. There are dozens of brands and styles on the market. They're generally of equal quality, but sheer numbers makes a choice difficult. Here are some tips on what to look for. There are basically 4 types of fishing rods: the beach and estuary rod, the jetty and wharf rod, the river rod, and the semi-game rod for those anglers who want to tackle stingrays, small sharks and big snapper. The beach and estuary rod is about 4.5 meters long with a fairly stout tip. They can have either a short or long butt, depending on what the angler prefers. They're flexible so that the fisherman can cast a great distance and control big fish like salmon in the surf. The jetty and wharf rod is about 2.5 meters in length and has a fine tip. It can be used as a universal rod in rivers and estuaries, but really it's designed just for the jetties for garfish, tommy rough and mullet fishing. The river or brim rod is quite short. Its length is approximately 2 meters. It has a very fine tip and is light and flexible. The semi-game rod is set with special roller runners. It has a stout tip and is both flexible and strong. To start with, the jetty rod can be used for practically all types of shore fishing. When selecting a rod, always pick one with at least 5 runners in the last 50 centimeters of the rod. This gives a lot better bend at the top of the rod. There are 2 types of reels for the beginner: the sidecaster and the egg beater. The LV sidecaster comes in a range of sizes and is used mainly on beach and estuary rods. The egg beater is by far the most popular with the average fisherman. Again, it comes in a range of sizes. Choose a big model for mulloway and snapper fishing, a middle of the range for brim and flathead, and a smaller version for jetty fishing. Always remember, when buying a reel, it's wise to pay a little extra for quality. Choosing the right fishing line is very important. Remember, you'll be catching fish weighing 2 to 3 kilos in the surf. Now you'll have to match it with a line that will handle a fish of this weight. Don't go under a 7.5 kilo breaking strain line. This line will have enough strength to enable you to handle most of the big fish. With your jetty rod, you can come down a little in your breaking strain line to 6 kilos. Don't go below this, as you don't know what you're going to catch from the jetty. You could easily hook a large fish, and remember, you have to lift it out of the water. You'll need a tackle box for your hooks, sinkers and other gear. The 2-tier version with small compartments in the centre and open at the bottom is ideal. The gear you should have on hand at all times are a range of limerick hooks from number 1 to number 9, a few number 3.0 snapper hooks for jetty fishing, some number 3 hooks, a few bean, pyramid and spring burley sinkers. These should range from 15 grams to about 35 grams in weight. Also a range of floats, a feed float, it's a float that allows you to place burley inside it, a bob float and a pencil float, a good quality knife, squid jigs, swivels which allow the trace of the line to spin evenly off the reel without causing the line to tangle. Also have a spare line on hand. Now you're ready to go fishing. Spool up with a line of about 6 kilogram breaking strain, and as you gain experience, go lighter. At low tide, a fisherman should go down to the beach he intends to fish and study the channels and gutters. This enables him to know where the fish will be when the tide is full. The places to look out for are the shore side of the sandbars and the edge of the gutters, which fill the pools as the tide rises. The fish will feed on the edge of the sandbar where it drops into deep water. That's where your fishing line has to land. Each day, thousands of tiny sea creatures die on the sand when the tide is out. As it rises to a full tide, the fish move in and feed on these creatures. This is why the best time to fish is generally an hour before the tide is full. Once the tide turns, the fish will go back into deeper water again to avoid being trapped in the shallows. These gutters and sandbars can be on a beach, in tidal rivers and estuaries. Also, check the beach after a storm. All kinds of shellfish are washed ashore, and this gives the angler an idea of what the fish are feeding on. If it's an ocean beach you're going to fish from, look for rips where the surf line breaks. You'll see the rips going out to sea at a fast rate. Don't fish in the rip itself, but fish on the edge of it. This is where the fish look for food. If you want to fish in deeper water, all you need to do is cast out into the rip itself, and the current will carry your line out as far as you want it to go. As a rule, it's best to fish within 50 meters of a rip. So remember to always study the beach. Whenever you go fishing, you should always have a wide variety of bait with you. Some days the fish will take cockles, the next worms or whitebait, so you must be able to adapt to whatever the fish are looking for. Baits are sold in most tackle shops. Here's a guide to the baits that the fish in our southern waters prefer. Bream, bloodworms, tube worms, shrimp, whitebait, small crabs, prawns and cockles. Flathead, strips of fish flesh, pilchards and whitebait. Garfish, gents, fish flesh or cockle valve. Mullet, mince burley or any type of beachworm. Mulloway, live fish like mullet, tommy ruff and garfish, pilchards, whitebait, bloodworms and garfish fillets. They also take lures like the Mr. Twister. Salmon, strips of fish flesh, whitebait and pilchards. Squid, a Yuzuri lure or fish flesh. Sweep, cockles, sea worms or mince burley. Snapper, stale squid, red mullet, salmon, prawn, tommy ruff or garfish. Tommy ruff, gents, pieces of fish flesh, crayfish, whitebait, mince burley, yellowfin sand whiting, fresh sea worms and cockles. Crabs, smelly fish heads or squid. Do not use snapper or mulloway heads, as they're the crab's main predators. You can collect your baits quite easily. Cockles are plentiful on mud flats and estuaries. Just wait for low tide and walk over the flats. When you find a cockle bed, just shuffle your feet to break up the sand, and then all you have to do is scoop up the cockles. In a few moments, you should have enough fresh cockles for a good day's fishing. In the same area, you'll find sea worms. All you need to do is look for holes in the sand and then plunge the shank of this pump over the hole and pull the handle back. Drop the mud onto a clear patch of sand. Now break up the sand and search through until you find the worm or clicker. That's a saltwater yabby. Tube worms can be found around mangrove swamps. All you need in the way of equipment is a gardening fork, a bucket and a good pair of gumboots. The tube sticks out of the ground, and all you have to do is dig right under it. The worm will remain in the actual tube. Just squeeze the end of the tube, and the worm will come out at the other end. Keep the worms in a bucket of sand and water to keep them alive. Little mud crabs are an excellent bait for catching most of your shore fish that inhabit rocky areas such as brim. The crabs are found right around the coast. All you have to do is lift up a rock at low tide and you'll find these little crabs underneath them. It's as easy as that. Squid are quite easy to catch. All you need is a yazuri or tiger prawn lure or a squid jag baited with fish flesh. Set the lure or jag a metre from the bottom. That's where the squid are. When using squid for bait, it's important to keep the ink sac. Finally crush the squid up and dip the pieces in the ink before you place them on the hook. This is the best way to use squid. Many shore-based anglers overlook the importance of burley. They think that all you need do is toss your line in the water and the fish will automatically be there. Not so. Burley is essential for the angler to attract and hold the fish in the area he's fishing. Burley can be made from mincemeat and a tin of sardines mixed into a thick paste, or another very effective method is to mix a tin of sardines into a loaf of bread. Use the burley with care. In other words, it must be contained so that it doesn't flow away on the tide from where you're fishing. Burley can be contained in a plastic bag with holes in it, or a burley spring sinker, or a feed float. Keep the burley fresh by changing it every 10 minutes. The burley must have a strong smell, because that's the first thing that alerts the fish to a food source. If you're fishing from a jetty, don't cast out a long way. If you get too far out, the burley will take the fish away. Fish as close to the jetty as possible. Remember, when mixing burley for jetty or wharf fishing, make sure it's sticky so that it'll stay in the spring of the sinker or float. It mustn't fall out when it hits the water. Watch where the burley is drifting, because that's where the fish will be. Garfish are the easiest fish in the sea to catch. They swim in huge schools near the beaches in southern Australia. Garfish can be found wherever there is seaweed growth. They're caught mainly during the summer months at dawn, dusk and at night. They can be caught from the beach, from estuaries and jetties. The best baits are gents, cockles and even garfish. They eat their own kind. Use plenty of burley to attract the garfish to your line, then cut it back to a trickle. Use too much burley and they'll go off the bite. There are two rigs that are successful: a feed or pencil float above 3 number 9 hooks on a metre trace, or 3 hooks below a spring sinker. With this rig, a cork or bob float is used to lift the line from the bottom. Use a 4 kilogram line on a 2.5 metre fine-tipped rod and keep lifting the line in a gentle motion to keep the bait moving. The Tommy Rough is a good sporting fish which is sought after by expert and amateur fishermen alike. They're found right along Australia's southern coastline. At night, they swarm around the piers and jetties. Tommies are essentially flesh eaters. They feed on pilchards, whitebait, prawns, worms and small fish. Tommies travel in large schools and grow to a length of 30 centimetres. They like nothing better than gents when they're offered by the shore angler. However, the gents must be bred in fish offal for the best results. This gives the gents a fishy taste to the tommies. Mince burley and garfish flesh can also be used with success. Fill the hooks right up with the bait, and remember, don't leave the point of the hook sticking out. The best rig for tommies is a 15-gram spring sinker below 3 No. 9 limerick hooks on a 7-kilogram breaking strain line. The traces to these should be no more than 8 centimetres long. Use mince burley in the sinker. When fishing for tommies, there's no need to jag at the fish when it bites. Just keep lifting the line, and when the fish takes the bait, just start winding the line in. The tip of the rod will hook the fish without your help. The tommy has a very brittle mouth, and any sharp jag will tear the hook out. The best time to fish for tommies is on a high tide, although they'll bite through the night on most occasions. Sand whiting frequent the shallow estuary and beach waters around the southern coast of Australia. They grow to a length of about 40 centimetres, but most fish caught are usually around the 26 centimetre mark. Sand whiting like warm waters, so therefore the best places to fish are close inshore in a few centimetres of water at high tide and early in the morning. The only bait they take all the time are live sandworms, but on occasions they will take tube worms and cockles. The whiting swim in schools for protection and are an easy fish for the angler to catch if using the correct rig. Bruce prefers a 15-gram bean sinker between 2 No. 8 limerick hooks on a 40 centimetre trace. The sinker should be allowed to slide about 30 centimetres between the two hooks. Don't go below 6 kilograms breaking strain with your line. Cast out and slowly retrieve the line. This will send up little puffs of sand, and this alerts the fish to the bait. Cover the hook completely with the worm bait and leave a short tail of worm hanging loose. Bait presentation is most important. A bait must look natural. Hold the rod at all times and keep working the bait. Bream is one of the wiliest fish in the sea, but with practice can be caught regularly by amateurs. They can be found on cockle beds, near rocks that occur near the beach, and areas that provide shelter for small fish. Bream grow to a length of about 53 centimetres. The best baits to use are bloodworms, tube worms, bungam worms, shrimp, whitebait, small crabs, prawns and cockles. So always take a wide variety of bait with you. The best rig to use is a single No. 3 beak hook on a trace at least 1 metre long. Run a very light bean sinker from the main line to a small swivel and use a very light line with a breaking strain of 4 kilograms instead of the normal 6 kilograms, because any weight on the rig will see the bream drop the bait and go away. The fish must not feel any weight at all on the line. That's most important. Bream stay close to shore, so you don't have to cast a long way out from the beach, normally just 15 to 20 metres. If you use worms for bait, thread the worm through the hook, cover the hook completely, but you must always leave at least 2 centimetres of tail hanging free. With other baits, fill the hooks up completely. Don't have any part of the hook showing at all. Use bulky baits all the time. The best time to fish is at night or first light, especially near the change of tides. Once you've cast out, Lay the rod down and leave about a metre of loose line off the reel, because when the brim picks up the bait, it can swim with it, and that's when they really swallow the bait. It's at this moment the angler should lift the tip of the rod and sink the hook. Flathead are common on coastal beaches and can grow to a length of about 70 centimetres. They travel in schools and spend 90% of their time on or near the bottom. They're found amongst certain types of weed or on plain, open, sandy patches and even amongst rocks. The rig to use for catching flathead is a 15-gram pyramid sinker 10 centimetres below a 70 centimetre trace with two number 3 beak hooks set 10 centimetres apart. Use a 6 kilogram breaking strain line with a rod or a 12 kilogram line if a hand line is used. The best baits to use are strips of fish flesh, pilchards and whitebait. Don't cover all of the hook with the bait. Keep the point clear because the flathead has a very hard mouth. The best time to fish is at high tide on the deep edge of a gutter on a beach or in an estuary. Cast well out from the beach and retrieve slowly. Remember, when handling this fish, watch out for the 2 poisonous barbs, one on either side of the head. Don't put your hands around the top of the fish. You'll be in extreme pain if you cut your hand on these barbs. The yellow-eye mullet is one of the most common fish along the South Australian coastline and estuaries. They're scavengers and take practically any bait. They grow to a length of approximately 35 centimetres and a weight of 500 grams. You'll find mullet in shallow waters, so remember to check those gutters. For bait, use worms or minced burley. The best time to fish is an hour before high tide. The rig Bruce suggests for you to use is a 15-gram spring sinker above 3 number 9 limerick hooks on very short traces of only 6 to 7 centimetres in length. Or you can use the same rig for catching sand whiting. When you bait your hooks, use large baits. Have the hooks well and truly covered with the bait, but be certain the point of the hook is not covered by a hard piece of meat or cockle. Mullet like a moving bait, so keep casting and retrieving the line. When one is hooked, take your time winding it in. The rest of the school will follow, and in most cases, take the remaining baits. Mulloway can be found right along the Australian beaches and rivers beyond tidal influence. They grow to 2 metres in length and weigh as much as 59 kilograms. They're not a hard fish to catch, providing you use the right rig. They have to be caught on the lightest possible gear with the least amount of resistance to a sinker. Therefore, Bruce prefers a rig with a 20-gram sliding bean sinker sliding down to a swivel above a metre-long trace, which has 3 snooted number 30 beak hooks. These hooks are snooted about 3 centimetres apart. When using live bait, such as mullet or Tommy Rough, bed 2 hooks into the fish's back just behind the gills and leave the other hook free over the fish's head. Mulloway will always crush a fish's head to kill it before taking the bait. That's why the hook is there. Set the hooks on a metre trace of heavier breaking strain than the main line. Try to use no sinker at all if you're in estuary waters, but if you have to, use a sliding bean sinker, as light as possible. In surf, of course, the sinker will have to be much heavier. If you're using fish fillets or a lure, keep the line moving all the time and make sure it's close to the bottom. The time to go fishing is at dusk or on a changing tide and up to 3 hours after dark. Remember, bait presentation is important. Always make your bait look natural. Salmon is one of the most sought-after fish in the sea with beach and estuary anglers, not for its eating qualities, but for the fight it puts up once it's hooked. Salmon are fish eaters and are known as the vacuum cleaners of the sea because of their appetite when they're in a feeding frenzy. The best time to fish for salmon is on the turn of the tide. The baits to use are strips of fish flesh, whitebait and pilchards. Rig the line with a pyramid sinker or a heavy bob float about a metre above ganged No. 1 limerick hooks. Use a 9 kilogram breaking strain line. Bait presentation is very important. Shape your bait so that it looks like a fish if you're not using whitebait or pilchards. Leave the points of the hooks exposed. When the salmon strikes, take it easy. Tire the fish out before you wind it in. Now, if you want to take fishing seriously, you need a boat, because it's much easier to go where the fish are rather than hope that they'll come to you. That's if you're fishing from a jetty or the beach. You must make sure that the boat has plenty of room aft. Remember that you must be able to move about freely with rods and lines. You need complete freedom. This boat Bruce has is ideal. You must choose the right tackle for each person on board the boat. The fishing tackle will consist of the following: 2 fishing rods. The normal general purpose rod needed for a boat should be no more than 2 metres in length with a sturdy tip. This rod can be used for your whiting and small snapper fishing. The second rod can be lighter, more like a brim rod with a fairly fine tip and still no more than 2 metres in length. This rod can be used for catching tommy rough and garfish on the surface. Your fishing lines are important too. You must take a range of line with you, starting from 4 kilogram breaking strain up to 10 kilograms, so you'll be able to change your line whenever you like to suit the size of the fish in the area at the time. Don't go over 10 kilogram breaking strain with a rod in a boat. The reels can vary from the egg beater type to the centre pin reels. The reel you select must have a drag on it, just in case you hook a large fish. Just a fixed centre pin reel isn't much good if you happen to strike a 5 kilogram snapper on a whiting line. The snapper will break the line every time. You'll need a range of hooks, starting at number 30 for larger fish like snapper to number 9 limericks for garfish and tommy rough. Snood your own hooks. Here's how it's done using a very large hook, so it's much easier to follow the procedure. It's a simple operation and works out much cheaper for you in the long run. The snood on the hook is always much stronger than those that have been done by machine. You'll need a small range of swivels, 1 or 2 pencil floats, just in case the tide isn't running when you're after garfish. If you're using hand lines, use large spools of 20 centimetre diameter with a line of 12 kilogram breaking strain for bottom fishing. That's a minimum. This will prevent the line from becoming tangled once it's in the boat. For the garfish on the surface, come back to a 6 kilogram line. For large snapper, if you're using a hand line, don't go under a 50 kilogram breaking strain. Otherwise you'll cut your hands on the line if you hook a large fish. The sinkers should range from 90 grams down to 30 grams in pyramid and bean styles. Always have a squid jig on hand, just in case a squid happens to come along. As far as bait goes, you don't need a wide range when you're on a boat. It really depends on the species of fish you're hoping to catch. Usually cockles, squid, pilchards and a few tube worms are sufficient. The reason is that the fish on the open sea are definite in their feeding habits while they're on the grounds, so a wide range of bait isn't required to bring them onto the bite. Always drop a squid line over the side of the boat whenever you're fishing. If you're seeking large snapper, remember they prefer very smelly squid. The older and more pink, the better they like it. Rigs for boat fishing fall into 4 different types. The first is a sliding rig with a bean sinker sliding between 2 hooks. The second is the standard pyramid sinker on the bottom with 2 hooks above it. The third is just a loose line, no float but only 2 hooks. The fourth rig is a leaded line with 2 ganged hooks or a lure. Always make up a spare rig just in case you break the line or it gets into a hopeless tangle. It saves valuable time, especially if the fish are biting. A lot of amateur fishermen overlook the use of burley. Now, burley is crucial if you want to catch fish. Bruce uses 3 types of burley. The first is just a handful of cockles thrown over the side of the boat or contained in a wire cage. The second is bread mixed with a tin of sardines into a slop and then placed into a plastic bag with small holes, which is then dropped over the side of the boat. And the third is 1 or 2 squid heads on a snapper line. Tides play an important part in the feeding habits of fish in our southern waters. There is a dodge tide every fortnight, and there are very high tides every other fortnight. The best time to fish any of these tides is an hour before and after the tide changes from a very high tide to a very low tide. When the tide is running very fast, it's a waste of time fishing for other than the surface fish like tommy ruffs or garfish. So always look at your tides. Always check the tides, and if there happens to be a dodge tide, move to deeper water. Don't fish close into shore because there'll be no movement at all. Out to sea there will be a little bit of movement. This is often just enough to keep the fish on the bite. Like the tides, the weather plays a very big part in catching large hauls of fish. In most cases, the best time to fish is just as the barometer starts to fall. That's usually 1 to 1.5 days before a cool change. But as the barometer drops further, you'll find that the fish will really come onto the bite. They always bite best when the barometer falls just before strong windy conditions. During the winter months, the weather will be more pleasant than during the summer months. If it's calm early in the morning, it should be calm all day. We're now ready to go fishing. So let's start with King George whiting, the most sought-after fish in our waters. King George whiting are caught mainly during the winter months, although there are many schools on the move during the summer. The areas where they'll be found are reef areas, where there's plenty of congee and sponge, which is filled with tiny worms, small crabs, little shrimp, small oysters, and green shoots of weed, which is the staple diet of these fish as they migrate. King George whiting generally bite as the tide slows down, and again as it picks up movement. The reason for this is that the small creatures the fish feed on will come out of their burrows when the tide stops. Now, when you catch the whiting on these rocky outcrops, make a note of the area. Mark the grounds, the date, month and time of day, the tide and the bait used, so that you can come back to the same spot year after year. There are 2 rigs for catching King George whiting. If you're using a rod, use a 6 kilogram breaking strain line or a 12 kilogram line if you're using a hand line. From a swivel, run a trace. Attach 2 number 5 limerick hooks 40 centimetres apart with a sliding 30-gram bean sinker between them. The top hook is attached to a 16 centimetre trace, or you can use a 30-gram pyramid sinker attached to the end of the line. 10 centimetres above the sinker, attach a number 5 limerick hook onto a 14 centimetre trace. Then 30 centimetres above the bottom hook, attach another number 5 limerick hook on a 14 centimetre trace. To attract King George whiting to the boat, you must use burley. All you need do is split open a couple of handfuls of cockles and throw them over the side, making sure that the tide will carry them to where your line is. Never throw cockles over the side unless you know exactly where they will land. Also, at the same time, use what is known as a slop line. This is a snapper line with 2 squid heads attached. This will keep the fish in the area. Now, when you bait up for whiting with cockles, always place the little black part of the cockle near the point of the hook, as that's the first part of the bait they'll attack. Sometimes the whiting will just lie there by the bait and just pick and chew on it. The way to catch them when they're in this mood is to lift the line just slightly until you feel their weight and then strike. Squid is also an excellent bait for catching King George whiting. Now, when you use squid to catch the whiting, make sure to mash the squid into a sticky mess. The reason is that the staple diet of whiting is baby squid. That is, squid approximately 2 centimetres long and very soft. They're almost a jelly, and of course they carry ink in a small sac. So as you bait up the finely mashed squid, add some ink to it, so that as it sinks to the bottom, a little trace of the ink seeps out, and that will attract the whiting. The best time to fish is on the turn of the high tides, generally early in the morning or late afternoon. You'll still catch a few on the turn of a low tide, but it's far better on the high tide. Every fisherman wants to catch a big red snapper, but very few do. They're generally found on heavy, rocky outcrops, in deep holes and gutters, around wrecks and artificial reefs. They're a very wary fish. Most are caught either at dawn or dusk and during the night, but the best results are when the water happens to be dull or dark. The best rig to catch snapper on is a hand line of 50 kilograms breaking strain, or if you're using a rod, a 12 kilogram line is ideal. Now, from a swivel, run a trace down and attach 2 number 50 beak hooks on a 30 centimetre trace for big snapper. If you're seeking small snapper, replace the 2 hooks with number 20 beak hooks and run a 90-gram bean sinker between the 2 hooks. There's a wide variety of bait to be used for snapper. You can use pilchards, red mullet, tommy rough, garfish, squid and prawns. Garfish are basically a summer fish. In southern waters, we have 2 main species. One is the big red-bill sea gar, and the other an estuary gar. In certain areas, they can be caught all year round, but really it's a September through to April fish. Garfish don't have any specific feeding ground. They just swim up and down the coast, feeding on young weed growth. The best burley to attract garfish is simply bread and tinned sardines. Mix the sardines in with the bread and grind it up into a thick paste. Now place it into a plastic bag with holes in it and drop it over the side close to the boat. Start off with a fairly heavy stream, and when the garfish arrive in the area, cut back the burley flow to just a light trickle of sardine oil. They'll still stay around the back of the boat, but be careful not to overfeed them to the point that they'll go off the bite. Now, the thing to remember about garfish is that they're bottom-feeding fish, so you have to get your burley stream going so that it slowly sinks in the water down to the bottom. The garfish will pick it up and follow it to the surface right up to the boat. Also, take notice of the fact that the garfish you see close to the back of the boat are not those that are going to bite. The fish that will bite will be back another 7 or 8 metres behind the boat. The best rig to catch garfish on is a 4 kilogram breaking strain line. Place 2 number 8 limerick hooks on a 10 centimetre trace, 40 centimetres apart. There's no need for a float except when the tide is weak, and then only add a pencil float. The best baits to use for garfish are the valve of the cockle or clear garfish flesh itself. Others prefer gents, but from a boat, gents are very messy. If it's windy, you have pollard or sawdust all over the boat, and add to that the rocking motion, then you can see that it makes baiting up a slow, tedious exercise. Don't use a smaller hook than a number 8, or else you'll spend the whole day trying to remove the hooks from the stomach of the fish, as they tend to swallow the whole lot. Use 2 hooks only, because when a garfish is caught, they will flick around all over the place. If you had a 3rd hook, the line could be in a tangle within seconds. Whenever you hook a double header, always remove the top fish first and leave the bottom one hanging there so it can't tangle the line. To strip the scales from the fish, hold them by the gills and then run your hand down either side. The scales are easily removed. Garfish will hook themselves, so all you need to do is just haul them in. Tommy roughs are another easy fish to catch. They swim in large schools right along the southern coast. They stay close to mouths of estuaries and the coastal areas. They're not fussy eaters and will take most baits. The fish is closely related to the Australian salmon. Tommy rough are caught much the same way as you would catch garfish. For burley, use a plastic bag, one with small holes in it, place a mixture of bread and sardines in it, and then drop the bag over the side of the boat and tie the bag to the boat. The rig to use is much the same as you would use to catch garfish. Use a 4-kilogram breaking strain line, place 2 number 8 limerick hooks on the trace 40 centimetres apart. No need to use a float unless the tide is weak. If that is the case, use a pencil float. The best baits to use to catch Tommy roughs are the valve of the cockle, fish flesh and gents. Once you hook a Tommy rough, be careful when winding it in. Remember, this fish has a very soft mouth, and if you jerk the line, you'll break the side of its mouth and lose the fish. When you start a burley stream, the Tommy roughs will arrive first to the boat. They'll stay around the boat for half an hour. When the Tommy rough leave, the garfish will then take their place. The technique for catching Tommy rough is exactly the same as for catching garfish. Snook require a certain know-how to catch. It's a wide-ranging fish and can be found along the coast from Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia and Western Australia. It has a large mouth with powerful teeth. The best time to fish for snook is on the high tide, early in the morning and again late in the afternoon. The snook will be found in the areas where there's a lot of whitebait or garfish. These are the main source of food for snook during the summer months. Weather is also very important when it comes to catching snook. The best time to fish for snook is just before a cool change, so keep an eye on the weather. In these conditions, the snook will come right up to the surface and snap at anything in the water. Snook provides great sport on light gear. When hooked, they break the surface constantly, usually with their mouths wide open. Snook are mainly caught during the summer months. The rig to use is a special leaded line of 50 kilograms breaking strain. Use 40 15-gram barrel sinkers spaced 30 centimetres apart, connected to a 7-metre trace with 2 ganged number 1 limerick hooks if using bait, or a Halco snook lure with a single number 1 hook. The line is designed this way as most amateur fishermen have outboard motors, and these have an underwater exhaust. Now, if you used a line going down very sharply from the stern of the boat, very often the lure or the bait is still under the exhaust noise of the motor, so fish won't come up to it. But if you use a proper leaded line, which goes out approximately 30 metres behind the boat with a 7-metre trace added to it, the bait or lure will be well away from all of that noise. The line is trawled behind the boat at varying speeds. For instance, if you're using a lure, the boat speed is about 2 knots. If you're using baits, the boat speed drops back to a knot. The line is actually let out to gauge the depth of the water almost to the full length of the leads. Sometimes you won't have to use all of the leads when you're trawling in shallow waters, but most of the time you will in water over a depth of 5 fathoms, as you'll need all of the leads to get the line down to the correct depth in the water. If you use a lure, just hold the line still. Let the lure do the work for you. Don't move it up and down. When you feel the snook hit the lure, don't jag, just hold on until you feel the weight of the fish on the line and then pull it in. If you jag, you'll only break the hook from the mouth of the fish. If you're using bait, a slow forward, backward arm motion is needed to make the bait work through the water. Now continue to do this until you feel the fish strike. If it isn't hooked immediately, throw the line back as fast as you can so that the bait stops in the water. In other words, it must just lie there absolutely still. What's happened is this. The snook has actually hit the bait. He knows it's a fish, and if it stops and slowly sinks in the water, he thinks he's killed that fish, so he'll come back a second time and take it. Now, when you bring the fish in, be careful if you're using the ganged hook method with bait. There'll be 2 hooks, and usually the snook has only taken one, leaving the other hook swinging around by your hands. When you hold the fish, hold it behind the head and then slide your thumb up under the gills. You have control over the fish as you remove the hook from its mouth. When baiting up for snook, use a very sharp knife and slice a strip of fish flesh which measures approximately 8 centimetres in length by 1 centimetre wide and 10 millimetres thick. You're actually placing a small strip of skin on the hooks. When placing the bait onto the hooks, be sure to have the grain of the fish running down to the bottom hook. This gives the bait a natural appearance in the water. Salmon are a migrating fish which move through southern waters mainly during the summer months. It's not a true salmon, but a member of the perch family. From September, large schools frequent our waters on a northern run, but some smaller schools stay close inshore, near reefs. They're a real fighting fish once hooked. The best baits to use for salmon are squid or any fish flesh. Also, the Halco snook lure is most effective. Anything that moves in the water will be attacked by salmon once they're in a feeding frenzy. Bruce prefers lures when fishing from a boat simply because it's easier to land them and to remove the hook. The rig to use is the same as for catching snook. That is, a 50 kilogram breaking strain line with 40 15-gram barrel sinkers spaced 30 centimetres apart connected to a swivel. Below the swivel is a 7-metre trace with a breaking strain of 10 kilograms. Attached to this trace are ganged No. 1 limerick hooks or a Halco snook lure with a single hook. Instead of letting all of the leads out on the snook line, for salmon you need only let out a dozen. That's all because the salmon will rise to the surface to take the lure or bait. The only time to fish for salmon from a boat is right on top of a high tide. This is the time they come into a feeding frenzy on whitebait and small fish in the area. Your boat's speed is the same as for snook, 1 to 2 knots, and just trawl along the edge of the school. It's as easy as that. Squid, or calamari, as most people call them, are plentiful in our coastal waters. We have 2 species of squid. One is the southern squid, which has flaps right down both sides, and the other is locally known as torpedo squid, with small flaps only right at the end of their body. This is actually the true calamari. They can be caught practically the whole year round on reef areas. An important point to remember is that squid like to lay near weed or anywhere they can find cover on the seabed. You must get your jig, or bait if you wish to use fish baits, near the bottom. Bruce finds the best way to catch squid is to drift the areas near the turn of the tide. If you strike 1 or 2 squid in one patch, turn the boat around and motor over the area again, because normally you'll find a large number of squid in one small area. When a squid attaches itself to the jig, remember there are no barbs on it, so you must keep weight on it all of the time, otherwise you'll lose the squid immediately. Once you have it next to the boat, lean over, hold it by the head, and point it down so that if there's any ink left, it won't squirt over the people in the boat, it'll squirt straight back into the water. Blue crabs are one of the delicacies of the sea. During the summer months, thousands of them are caught in nets from boats right along the coast. The females move into the grounds in September, and by December, the male crabs follow up and the season begins. The male crab can be identified by its narrow flap on its back. The female has a much broader flap. She's brown in colour, and the male is bright blue. To catch crabs, you'll need a drop net. Make sure there's a stout piece of line running across the centre of the net with a loop in it so you can secure the bait to it. Never place the bait in the bottom of the net because when that net goes down, there's no guarantee that the bait is going to be in the centre of that hoop. It could be outside, so you'd be feeding the crabs with no likely chance of catching them. For bait, use any fish heads except mulloway or snapper. These are the natural crab predators, and once the crabs see them in the net, they'll just shy away. The best time to go crabbing is at high tide to when the tide drops off in the mornings. Now start with 3 fish heads. Push a screwdriver through the eye sockets of the head and then feed through a line. Tie all the heads to this line tightly and then toss the net over the side and try to land it near a hole or gutter. These holes are just sand patches in amongst heavy weed. Try to get your nets as close to the edge of the sand and weed as possible, because that area usually has a little ledge of limestone that the crabs like to walk along. So don't look for large, wide sand holes. Pick the smaller ones that are just big enough for your boat to sit over. When you set your nets down, set them right across the tide, never up and down the tide. The reason is this: if you set them up and down the tide, only one net will catch the crabs, the one with the smell nearest to where the crabs are. If you set them across the tide, all of the nets will be working for you. Pull the nets every 3 to 4 minutes. Now, start with 3 fish heads in the net and leave it down for about 2 or 3 pulls. Then add another fish head and keep doing this after every 2 or 3 pulls so that there is fish odour going out through the water. The reason for this is that crabs have very poor eyesight. They can't see for more than 2 or 3 metres in the water, but have a very keen sense of smell that can range for several hundred metres. This is what attracts the crabs to your net. The smell must be kept up all of the time. If the hole you're working becomes quiet, move to another one. You'll soon catch more crabs. When you remove the crabs from the nets, you'll be putting them into a bucket or bin. Hold the crab and gently place it into the bin upside down. This way, it won't snap at other crabs in the bin. The crabs will just quietly lay there, and you'll have whole crabs when you arrive home, instead of half the catch with their claws missing. There are thousands of fishing grounds around the southern coast of Australia. Many are known, but there are far more that are yet to be discovered. The type of areas you're looking for are limestone outcrops where there's plenty of sponge, corkweed, light sea grasses and small rocks. Now these are not necessarily large in area, they may be only a few square metres, but they will hold fish because on these areas the food source will satisfy a wide variety of fish. Little crabs, worms, small shellfish and oysters are all in these areas. Once you find one of these grounds, make sure you landmark it accurately, then come back to it regularly. And most importantly of all, keep records every time you go out to it. You need to keep a little diary, recording every detail, such as what time you left the ramp, where you went, name the grounds, what the weather conditions were like, what bait you used, the time you fished, the number of fish caught, and what species of fish were caught. Write everything down. Mention what time the fish started biting, if the sea was rough or calm, what cloud cover there was, if any at all, and how the tide was running, so that next year you'll know exactly where to go. You'll know that you caught fish on these grounds last year, you will catch them again this year. It's a safe bet that you will. Your markers for the fishing grounds need not be sophisticated drawings, however they must be accurate. Once you've caught all the fish you need, the next task will be to scale and fillet them. This takes a little practice to do it properly. Now first of all, scale the fish thoroughly, but don't remove the gut. Lay the fish on its side and, starting from the tail, slice the flesh close to the backbone, right up to the head. Turn the fish over and repeat the process. All of the gut remains on the backbone. The only bones left are on the rib cage near the head. Cut these out from the back of the fish to the belly. There, you have 2 fillets. This method applies to all scale fish. Now that you have all of the information, it's time for you to put it into practice. But remember, treat the ocean with respect. Don't, whatever you do, risk your life or the lives of others just for a fish. And so, good luck and good fishing.